March has quite a few big releases for video games. We're talking Princess Peach Showtime, Rise of the Ronin, Horizon Forbidden West made its way to PC, and Dragon's Dogma 2 released to some interesting reception. But I have a feeling that a lot of players may have overlooked my favorite release of the month, and frankly, may just be my top release of the year so far. The little indie game in question is Pepper Grinder. Pepper Grinder is a fun little game about the main character, Pepper, hunting down the bad guys that stole her treasure. It's simple, and gets straight into the action of drilling through levels with some of the smoothest platformer gameplay I've felt since Celeste. But before I get too far into explaining the game, I need to tell you a little personal backstory I have with this title. I actually got the privilege of playing the first level of this game a whole 5 years ago, in 2019. Wait, 2019 was 5 years ago? Now that I'm sane again, let me finish my story. Back in fall of 2019, I was starting college at the University of Oregon in Eugene, and I left after a whole term. But in that short time I was there, I had heard that there was a little indie game convention happening in town, and me and a couple friends decided to check it out. One large room with indie developers showing off their current projects and demos. I tried playing several games, checking out what all was in store, but one game instantly stood out. That game was Pepper Grinder. The demo was only the first level of the game, but me and my friends instantly fell in love with the smooth gameplay and wonderful level design. We couldn't wait to see more, and I've been following this game ever since. And now, it's finally here, and I finally got to play the whole game, something I've been waiting half a decade for. Now, I get to talk about it. I've mentioned this in passing a couple times already, but I can't stress enough just how smooth the gameplay and movement is in this game. It's a simple concept, really. There are some moments through the levels that require some standard platforming, but for the most part the levels will take place burrowing through the ground and sky, launching yourself to the next destination like a dolphin leaping out of water. Probably because the game's movement was inspired by Sega's Echo the Dolphin. Just probably. You also have a little boost that you can perform while drilling, not only necessary for some jumps, but also allowing you to speed up your progress and even perform some skips, sometimes necessary to complete levels in their time attack mode. Along with these basic movement mechanics, hooks are introduced fairly early in the game. These can take a little bit of getting used to properly launch yourself off of, but when mastered, they only add to the flow of the gameplay and levels. Speaking of levels, the level design here is just superb. Every level is crafted expertly around these core gameplay mechanics and allow for a perfect flow state. Each level feels different and unique, despite the core gameplay being so simple and streamlined, and each one poses its own challenges to overcome. These challenges can include some other gameplay mechanics that stick around just long enough to make an impact, but don't overstay their welcome. You can always count on Pepper Grinder keeping things fresh every few levels, adding a little spice to the mix to change things up. As I mentioned a little earlier, there is also a time attack mode for each level after you complete the level once. These often take a deeper mastery of the controls and gameplay, and could be easily seen as a speedrunner's dream. In terms of the normal levels, the game consists of 4 worlds, biomes, locations, whatever you want to call them, each with their own boss at the end, very much taking inspiration from the traditional Mario formula. What it doesn't take from the Mario formula is the boss design. Pepper Grinder's bosses can be surprisingly challenging, especially on a first playthrough. We're not talking Dark Souls, but they take an accurate knowledge of the gameplay mechanics, making you use the space you're granted in each fight to its fullest potential. None of the bosses are overly complicated, that's not the nature of the game, but they do require nuance and a subtle use of the movement and controls. No other boss sums this up quite as well as the final boss, Emperor Naro. It's a genuinely memorable fight, with a larger difficulty spike than the previous bosses, but it also expertly uses the game's core mechanics to create a truly cinematic final showdown, something that isn't always easy to accomplish within a 2D platformer. Along with the gameplay, something else greatly enhances the atmosphere: the visuals. Pepper Grinder's sprite work is beautiful. With a bright and impactful color palette, each level is a work of art to really take in, and it's something that makes you really want to just slow down sometimes to fully appreciate it. The art style is simple as most pixel art is, but detailed enough to create some truly wonderful sprites. It reminds me a lot of the art style of another little indie game I adore, Moonlighter. This top-notch pixel work is another area where the bosses really shine. Bosses like the Magma Worm and Emperor Nero look truly menacing and add to the intensity of their fights. The animations are smooth and full of impact, creating a personality for these characters without having to use any words or dialogue. There's not much else to mention when it comes to the visuals. They're just good, plain and simple. And to cap off this game's atmosphere, the soundtrack does just what it needs to do. Pepper Grinder's OST is wonderful. It's another piece of the game that reminds me of my love for the original Sonic the Hedgehog games, its music being just as iconic as the gameplay. The music perfectly blends with the rest of the atmosphere, all perfectly culminating to create a world that is all too easy to get lost in. It's also been the music that has been in the background of this whole video. I couldn't help myself from purchasing the soundtrack, and I knew that there was nothing better to accompany this video. There just wasn't another option. Pepper Grinder is a triumph. As the first published game from the dev team, REC, it's absolutely stunning. Some people may be disappointed that the game is only about 3 to 4 hours long for a single playthrough, but the game has great replayability, especially if you want to master the time trials. It simply is a fun game, a game that I had some silly little history with, even if it was just that one early demo. I can't wait to see what else REC has in store. If this is their first game, I can only imagine what the second and third and so on will look like. So go try out Pepper Grinder. I think it'll be worth your time. And if you like this little video, please consider subscribing to the channel and watching this other video on the screen that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. See you later, and remember to boop a snoot.